Hi, and welcome to our talk today. I'm Dr. Emily Wilson, and today I am here with Dr. Csilla Veress, who is an amazing naturopathic doctor and acupuncturist practicing in Santa Rosa, California. And she's also been a longtime friend of mine. And Dr. Csilla brings um, so much experience in a world that is so that our culture is so ingrained in, but there's a lot of misinformation about. So I'm so excited to talk with Chilla today and to help you understand a little bit more about what's going on in the world of fasting. So a bit about Dr. Csilla Veress. She specializes in nutrition and lifestyle medicine, and she's an expert in prolonged water-only fasting. Dr. Csilla is passionate in helping patients achieve optimal health, focusing on activating the body's inherent physiology to heal. She's also the author of Intermittent Fasting for Longevity ebook, a chronic stress resilience course, a Fasting 101 course, and she's the contributing author to the sleep module for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine curriculum, as well as numerous articles and guest appearances in various media platforms. So, Dr. Chilla, I am so excited to have you here, and I hope you don't mind I keep calling you Dr. Chilla.
Not at
But
all.
before we started filming today, I was telling her that I wanted to just share this quick little tidbit that Chilla shared recently when we were on a girls' trip together. And it has kind of changed my life. Actually, it's completely changed my life. And so I think that there's just so much wisdom that we can share and experience in the next 20 minutes or so. So I'm so excited to dive in. But first, I want to tell you about this because or over the years, I should say, I've kind of become a coffee addict. Unfortunately, that's very true. Never more than maybe 2 cups a day, but I kind of needed them. And when we were on this trip, Chilla was saying that she stopped drinking coffee during the weeks or during weekdays. And I thought, I can do that. I can do that. And so when I got back from this trip, I started cutting coffee out. I went to green tea in the mornings. Yeah. And it was really, really rough. I had about 2 weeks where every single day I was a mess in the afternoon. But I was a mess in the afternoon beforehand anyway, because the coffee was giving me such a spike and a low. And after again about 2, maybe 3 weeks, I started leveling out and I have noticed such a profound change in my energy. So thank you, Chilla. I wanted to just share
Oh.
that
That
experience.
makes me so happy. That's so, yeah, you know what? That is a really great example of what my practice is actually on a day-to-day basis. I work at a clinic called True North, and what we really specialize is a whole food plant-based, salt, sugar, oil free. And we really try to help people get rid of highs, like stimulating, like, substances like, the coffees in their lives and even potentially teas, but it's really about working with the patient. But it's really exciting because that's what I always tell people. People will always come in, or people that I talk to, they're like, "There's no way I can ever get salt out of my diet. There's no way I can ever get oil out of my diet." And one of the things I always say is that you really like see how it works for you, and if it works for you, then adopt it. But also recognize that if we're doing certain things in our world in the way that maybe they were designed to, or we're doing it in a more like lesser fashion or more moderate, it probably won't have, the massive like health implications that are what's happening in our modern world. Like, it used to be that coffee was just too expensive. Like we couldn't have more than maybe like a little cup. Now we're having like jumbo sizes, and on top of
What?
it, I know, what I mean? Like, and we're having like, and I mean, if you will go through like Starbucks or any of those places, you're not even really getting coffee anymore. You're getting like a sugary drink, right? And so things have shifted, is what I'm trying to say. And also, to pay respect to the fact that coffee also affects cortisol levels, and cortisol levels, when you affect those, you affect glucose levels. So not only are we getting stimulatory highs and lows, we're getting glucose shifts as well. So, and the reason I say that is because So many people come into our offices and they say, I'm hypoglycemic. And while there absolutely are true hypoglycemia cases, what we find is that when you start shifting things like getting coffee out of their diet, just getting sugar, like try a 30-day cleanse of just sugar in your life, you'll see people say, "Oh, I guess I wasn't hypoglycemic. It's just the fact that I was, misregulating like all this other physiological components because of my diet, or I was adding in, all this like stimulation when I'm also high stressed and going all day long, right?" So anyway, that's really cool that you had that. I just wanted to introduce this is what we do in my clinic. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
that's awesome. And I think too, for me, working with so many going working through with patients for weight loss over the
Mhm.
last maybe like year and a half, 2 years, I realized I worked with so many overweight, stressed out, exhausted patients who were also like super inflammatory and sick, who also
Mhm.
were hypoglycemic, and they were being di or being prescribed sugar pills, glucose pills.
Oh,
And then we take a look at their blood work and we see, oh my God, your fasting insulin's like 42. Do
I
you know
know.
why you're hypoglycemic? Because your pancreas is about to blow. Like it's
Yeah.
the thing. Like
Yeah.
when we get to the root cause, the true reasons for why people are feeling the way they're feeling, we have the power to change their lives. And so I'm so excited to hear more about your experience with fasting because I think that there is a lot of profound potential to change people's lives. But again, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I'm somebody who approaches the conversation with so much caution. So I
Mhm.
want to hear from you about your experience at True North and with patients and
Yeah.
what you've learned.
Yeah, so I will say water fasting is not for everybody. And actually, in our modern day world, again, like I mentioned, things have shifted. So we are approaching, I think, a world where it's unprecedented, like, you know, kind of level of inflammation in individuals for multiple reasons. I mean, it's not just one thing. It's not just the diet. It could be the level of toxicant load, non-heavy metal, heavy metals. It can be microtoxins. It can be now we're seeing a really large amount of increased intestinal permeability, which is also called leaky gut because of our modern lifestyles, too stressed individuals, people who are not sleeping appropriately, we're not having community. So there's a lot of these really not only foundational pieces that are broken apart, but then there is a higher level of, I think, across the board, so much that a body has to deal with. So that's why I say that, because I think when people hear about fasting, the first thing that I always hear people say, even in our clinic, they're like, I have to fast. I have to fast this many days because this is what I heard and this is what I understand of it. And it's like, okay, for sure, like there's truth in, yes, if you go potentially longer in your fast in a safe manner, could we sometimes see increased benefits for a person? Yes. But does that mean every person should be doing long-term fasting? And that's no, right? What I will say is this, I am really honored to work at True North because in the last probably 6 months, I think due to just the amount of like podcasting that I've been doing, and also mostly Dr. Goldhammer, who's the owner of True North, we've been seeing like a lot of patients in that are very quote unquote expert fasters. So not only do they do fasting, but they also do fasting around the world in different they call themselves fasting centers. I have had now at least a dozen patients say to me, "Oh, like I understand now why you guys do fasting the way you do and why everybody else potentially is not really legit, or there could be danger in how they're doing it, right?" And the reason I say that is because when you do water fasting at True North, and there's two really big components. One is to understand we do water only fasting, and I know that that sounds so basic, but we don't use coffee, we don't do salt in the water, we don't do electrolytes in the water. It's really water only. And you are hyper medically supervised. And what I mean by that is that you're going to see a doctor at the intake, you're going to see a doctor at the outtake. In between that process, you're going to be seen by my team twice a day. You're going to have constant access to a medical provider, or I would say, a practitioner at every single moment of you being there. And we will stop fasting if we deem it not appropriate for that person long, like wherever they are in the process. So we're constantly watching vitals. We're taking blood work every 7 days. We're doing urine every 7 days. All of this, it seems, I've had so many patients say, like, gosh, it seems like almost overkill. But when you see it in practice, and when you see actually the kind of the breadth of what could happen in a water fasting scenario, especially like I said, probably for me, I've been in it for 10 years now. In the last like few years, we've seen more complex cases. Lots of times we can't predict fast. I mean, when I was there at the beginning, there was a little bit of that prediction we could do, like, oh, this person comes from a good lifestyle, good diet, they should be okay with the fast, right? Like they're going to have an easy stay. That's not the case all the time. There's a lot more side effects with fasting that you really need to know how to, kind of control and actually help during that period of time without putting anything into the body. Like, right. So if somebody's having side effects, we're not going to necessarily first think about what can we, put in the body. It's more about how do we shift and change that? Like, do they need to rest more? Do they need to get out of the sun more? Are they, is there some sort of stimuli in their environment? Can we use essential oils, right? In a few essential oils that we have that have good clinical efficacy, with just kind of activating relaxation or nausea, things of that. Can we use acupuncture? Can we use craniosacral? And then if we need to, we have methods, really safe methods of breaking fast, or shifting people where we're using whole foods. We're using broths if we need to, vegetable broths. We're using juices. And a big component is like, how are you prepping for the fast? And then how are we taking people out of a fast so that what you did in the fast is actually supported, and you can take it with you instead of we have, and I, I've just been witness to it because True North is now known. We have had phone calls from patients in the hospital that are like, I heard about this water fasting and I just thought I could do it by myself. So I just did a 30-day fast on my own. I'm in the hospital. They're telling me my electrolytes are all over the place and I don't know what's going on. And when you talk to them, it's like, well, when start off with chicken and beef right after a 30-day fast, you're going to go into something called refeeding syndrome. And that's going to land you in the hospital because then your body's pushing way too much insulin in the system. You're starting to disrupt all the different electrolytes. And on top of it, you're going to start to have organs shut down your body and you can die from it. So, I mean, these are real things that do happen. And when you think about what people are thinking about, they're thinking, oh, I'm in ketosis, so I need to constantly keep in ketosis. So it's like, they're trying to rationalize it, but it's like you can't come out of a fast where you've dropped your caloric load and all of a sudden input one of the hardest things the body has to do to digest, and then if expect it to keep going that way. That's why, people trying to achieve ketosis with a dietary aspect is a little bit, it's actually a lot different. I should say it that way. It's a lot different than the ketosis that you have with water fasting. So that's kind of an overview. I would say those, I think I touched upon like the major parts that people, I think, need to be aware of. And again, not everybody's safe to fast. I mean, there's a lot of people that come to True North with like chronic kidney failure or, epileptic seizures or pretty severe, complex, cardiovascular concerns where they're not going to be fasting. They're going to be maybe doing modified, kind of programs where we're feeding them, actually. We're getting them into healthier diets. We're checking in on how they're living their lifestyle. So, there's different levels of how you can start to bring that process to them, and they might never be, candidates for fasting. So those are the big things I think to be understanding when you go into a fasting protocol. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions. And it was everything I could do not to like type and take notes while you're
Sorry, I just kind of threw everything at you, but I just.
I love it though. And I think
Yeah.
so I have a couple of quick questions
Mhm.
and the one is really a curiosity of mine and I think it comes from my own healing and my own experience working with patients as well, around like seeing more challenges or people who are surprisingly challenged by fasting. And I'm wondering if maybe some of that is like, we live a healthy lifestyle, but there are a lot of type A people who live a healthy lifestyle who are super, super stressed, right?
Mm.
So do you think that chronic stress might play into our resilience during fasting?
Gosh, this is why you and I are like friends. I feel like we always go on this like beautiful. I just feel like you, yes. That's my over exuberated kind of excitement until your question. I feel like not enough people examine that, and thank you for looking at that because um simplicity wise, and I think I'm oversimplifying it, but I actually think that there's a lot of truth to it. I find that there's probably three main reasons why people, or three main things you can examine to find out how people will fast, right? So number one is prepping. So if people prep well, a lot of times I feel like you really, and they're okay. Obviously, this is in the context of we've deemed it okay for them to do a fast. That is one thing. The prepping phase. The second, and the prepping phase, just for everybody to know, it's basically we recommend at least 2 to 3 days, just fruits and vegetables, nothing else in your diet, just fruits and vegetables and water to really get the body acclimated to fasting. The second piece is medication. So not only what people have been on, what we're trying to get them off. Obviously, if you're on something that needs to be tapered or potentially you can't get off of it, you might not be able to fast because you can't fast with medication. So that's the other piece. And then the third piece, which I always say to patients, is stress. I have seen over the years of doing this that you are absolutely, absolutely correct in that you can see a person who has super health. I mean, they're eating whole food plant-based, SOS free, they're sleeping, I mean, you would look at their lifestyle and say, wow, everything is in place except for they are now going through a divorce. They are having higher stress than they normally have had. There's different things in their life and they're experiencing severe stressors in their life at that moment. You will see that person go through fasting very differently to the point where they might actually not be able to fast. Like in day 3, day 4, that's usually everybody's a little different, but that's around the time because you're kind of moving into full-blown ketosis at that point. You Around that time is where you'll start to see people either break down or start to show you signs where they need to shift gears, like they're just not going to keep fasting. And that's like massive, you know, kind of symptoms like nausea, vomiting, really lightheadedness, headaches, pain, back pain, all the major muscle groups in the body will start to become achy, especially at night, acid reflux. I mean, there's a magnitude of different symptoms that could come up, and it doesn't have to be the person came in with any of those, right? It was just this effect of fasting. Yeah. So, yes, I couldn't agree more with the stress piece.
Well, it's so interesting because that also could be interpreted by people as like a detox reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very different than what sounds to me like a stress-induced crisis.
Well, actually, they are pretty similar. So the detox reaction is very similar to what happens when people start to shift out when their bodies start to tell them that they are not they cannot continue the fast where it is. And the reason why those two are very similar is because the way I kind of describe it for patients so that they understand it is that fasting, the reason it works is because of hormesis. One of the reasons it works is because of hormesis, right? And for those readers that maybe don't know what hormesis is that when you apply a little bit of stress onto the body, if the body can match it, what starts to happen is these epigenetic changes happen where the body actually strengthens and it actually it fortifies so many different areas of the body that the body comes out of that stressor better than it was before, right? So this is why exercise is hormetic, sauna, cold therapy, and fasting. If you can imagine though, if you apply a fast to a person that's already stressed and their body's already dealing with a lot of its own physiological issues, the body doesn't have the ability, or it has a decreased ability to match the fasting. So that's why those detox symptoms, or let me just say it this way, those different physiological changes come roaring ahead for that person, because it's the body saying, I can't take that. I can't do this right now because this is way too much stress on my system, you know? So, and it's kind of the same thing as like, if you start kind of detoxing a lot of other, chemicals or things from our environment, the body's like, whoa, this is way too much. And then you have those symptoms as well. So they're actually pretty similar, truthfully. Yeah. The one symptom I will say that's very distinct to the stress response is the fatigue part. Like, you will sometimes see people be like, I can't even move. And that's when you say, you know what, if you can't go to the bathroom on your own, if you can't get your own water, then we need to shift gears, because that's dangerous. So,
Yeah, wow. Before we hit play or record, we were talking a little bit about the importance of rest in fasting. And I want to hear everything you have to say about this. And I think one thing that came to me while you were speaking too was just how essential it is in our modern culture to work with experts, to talk with experts. And if you're going to do something intense like a water only fast, a prolonged water only fast, like absolutely do it under medical guidance. Because there's so much rhetoric out there and it's just confusing. And that's how people end up in the hospital. I mean, this
mhm.
is so important for people to know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
again,
And I will say on that too, thank you for bringing that back up, because the one thing I will say on that too is, because I've actually read um, most, I would say most, not maybe all of the intermittent fasting books out there. And there's so much, even with really great doctors, I'm so happy that people are talking about fasting or even intermittent fasting. So, I hope people understand, like, I'm super excited people are getting on like such a powerful mode to reset our bodies and reset our physiology and really kind of activate the self-healing mechanism we all have. But I will say that in understanding long-term fasting, what I will say is that there's still actually, with experts, like some misinformation. I would say only because sometimes, and I think we all understand this, right? Sometimes when you do something and you do it maybe once or twice, you escape it, right? Like you get out, put some electrolyte drops in my water. It's not a big deal. It's like, it's not a big deal. Or I'm just going to drink a little bit of coffee. Like, it's not a big deal. And actually, I'm still in ketosis, right? Well, the problem is when you're doing it for 2 to 3 days, again, you haven't broken through to that, basically the full blown, like, you are, maxed out in what level of ketotic, physiology you are in. And that's kind of happens around like day 3 in our body. And so there's still that room for wiggle, but once you get past that, all of those pieces become very, very dangerous, and they can become very dangerous. Those are the things that when you're punching the body in one direction, you start to disrupt it to the point where you start to have electrolyte imbalances long term. With coffee, it's so dangerous. I mean, you can have which afibrillation, which is like irregular heart rhythms. You can have tachycardia, which is heart rate over 100, because your body's in a different state. And so you're getting the stimuli that you're kind of used to, but it exaggerates, right, during a fast. Which brings me to your question about stress, is that, or rest during fasting. And I was mentioning this to you, like, if I was going to write a book about fasting, I think the thing I would really try to focus on is how vitally important it is for people to fast in a resting state. And I think that's actually the power behind True North. We are an inpatient facility, so people have to come to us in order to fast. And what we ask patients to do is try not to work during this time, really try to minimize as much outside. I say to my patients too, try to minimize even social media, getting on the computer, getting on the phone, like really use this time to go into this deep state of just like rest and meditation. And you don't have to meditate the whole time, but it's just like use that time, because when you combine all the physiological biochemical shifts that happen in the body with this place of parasympathetic tone, which is basically where your body heals at the best, you come out in a state far surpassed than I think what happens when people try to just fast, because all they're looking at is the physiology that happens, and they're not appreciating that fact that if you are in a fight or flight, if you're stressed out, if you're working all the time, if you're going, if you're walking, if you're moving, if you're doing all this stuff all day long, you're in literally a sympathetic tone state, right? Like you're in this state of like, I'm either going to fight or flight, which is the primary, two kind of modes of action. Your body is not in its heightened state of healing, right? It's just not, it can't be, because we're opposing it. And so people, I think, want to singularize, like they want to pull out and they want to just say, well, fasting is so powerful because of, the hormesis aspect or the ketosis aspect or the autophagy that happens or all these little pieces. And I always say, yeah, those things are probably going to happen when you reduce your caloric load. But then on top of it, you're bringing up this basic nervous system response that doesn't allow the body to get as deep as you need it to be. And so, and I've seen this actually, like I've seen this in my patients where people have come in and they're like, I'm not going to listen to you guys. I'm going to be taking showers the entire time I'm fasting. And the reason we recommend against it is, again, we're just minimizing how much activity you have during the day, and we don't want people to get lightheaded and, to pass out. And so we're trying to help keep people as safe as possible. Or like we ask, walk a little bit, but not a lot, try to rest as much as you can. And, people will do it one time, later on in their, in their lifespan of doing fasting. And in the beginning, they'll say, I'm not going to listen to all that. And they have very different fasts, and you see very different, shifts, even in like markers. Like, you'll see people that are able to drop their hemoglobin A1C faster. They're able to drop visceral fat faster. They're able to reverse their blood pressure, in less time. I mean, you see people, and to the point where, I mean, if I had $1 every time I had somebody say this to me, I would probably be a rich woman. But like, people would say, I wish I would have done it in a way where I rested more, because I totally understand why you guys say that. Like it's this knowing, it's this like deep knowing of like, I would have gone one step deeper in my healing, so yeah.
And it's because they're now accessing that deeper, slower rhythm of their nervous system, right? Like that parasympathetic. I think a lot of, that I'm a big fan of Joe Dispenza, but he talks a lot about, like the brain waves and how it's these very slow brain waves, the theta, delta's sleep, but right above that is theta. And that's where we kind of access our subconscious, where potentially magic happens. And that's the second slowest brain wave that we have. Um, so maybe there's like a metaphor or an alignment there.
I guarantee you there is. I wish we could study this. I'm going by clinical experience only. Like, I mean, we see over 1,000 patients for fasting, a year. So this is just me seeing, hundreds of patients every year. And I just collect all this like understanding of like what I'm seeing in my patients. But I guarantee you, if we were to study it somehow, you'd find the brave waves would definitely be part of it, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, because this is something that we don't think about
No.
when it comes to fasting.
Well, and I think you said it perfectly too, when you said your work with patients around their weight loss. Like I think one of the other aspects that it helps is that when you pull away, and this is why fasting works too, is sometimes when you pull away from all the distractions in your life, whether it's food, whether it's, for us, because people are coming to True North, it's also like family and responsibilities. And I know that's not possible for everybody, but when that happens and you actually do that on a work level, on the hyper speed that we're at, I think people really realize like, oh, my lifestyle is the problem, or oh, now I can understand like this is why I need to make sleep a priority. Like I understand this now. Like I mean, I think health is one of the best, predictors of healthier outcomes afterwards, right? Because if somebody walks away and they're like, I feel the best I've ever felt in my life. Like I didn't know this is what I could feel. I didn't know I had this level of energy because I was stuck in such a low level. Like I understand like this is what healthy feels like. There's no way I'm going back, right? And so then you'd be surprised. People that walk in being like, I'm not giving up my coffee ever. I'm not giving up my salt. I am definitely going to keep staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning. Like people that make these hard, like, I am not following your stuff because this is bogus, will walk away being like, I don't want to lose how good I feel right now for that does I'm ready to change.
That's
And
awesome.
I'm sure you see it too all the time, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's always so inspiring. And
Yes.
one other area that you brought up that I think is also kind of a newer, I don't hear a lot of people talking about it in pop culture, and I think it's newer in like the research arena too, is the connection between fasting and the microbiome. So
Yeah.
I wanted to hear a little bit about this too.
Yeah, I love the microbiome. I started studying it really deeply a few years back. Well, actually, I say a few years back, but I keep forgetting it. Like a decade ago, actually. And I started studying it because I started to see patients that came into my clinic, and I was really upset because fasting was helping everybody, and then all of a sudden we had these few patients where fasting wasn't really helpful. I mean, it didn't worsen cases. It maybe improved them by 1 to 5%, but like that's not good enough for me. I'm like, I want to get you healthy, healthy. Anyway, so I started to go down this road of like, well, what else could it like where like what else could we really examine in this world? And because of the fact that we work within that nutritional lifestyle field, the first thing that really popped for me was microbiome. And so I started really looking into it, and I was like, oh, look at that. How do you increase diversity in the gut? You have plant-based foods, and that's right in line with what we really teach is having a plant-centered diet, right? And so it started this trajectory for me on really studying the microbiome. And I think probably a really amazing like case study for everybody is that we had a patient. She's an older lady, and she had Lyme in her history, and she treated the Lyme, but she was really plagued by just extreme fatigue to the point where she just had no motivation for anything. She really wanted to exercise. She just didn't have the energy to exercise, and her health was, deteriorating along the way. She had digestive gas, bloating. Her stools were pretty normal, but they could definitely improve. And then she had massive brain fog. She was like, I just can't concentrate. And there's a lot of family stressor as well. And she'd come in fast and she'd feel great in terms of she would feel a boost of improvement, but she was still at a low level brain fog, fatigue, all of that. So with her, what we did was we did a fast, and then we did a microbiome assessment, and then we got her into we found that not only was there inflammation, but we also found increased intestinal permeability. So when we treated that, when we finished that treatment, we had a follow-up assessment that showed she was very much healed from that. But I didn't even need the test because she walks into my office and she goes, I don't, she goes, I have never, she goes, I feel like I am myself again. Like I feel like almost like a new person in a way because I've been living this life so long, and literally every symptom cleared. And she was, you know, walking more. She was dancing with her husband. I mean, her husband noticed the changes too. He was like, I have my wife back, right? So that case for me kind of jet setted me even further into it because I was like, wow, this woman had such good results with the fast, but it still didn't get her to the point of where we got to with actually including a little bit of this supportive measure. And so I started to just really go into a deep dive with it. And what we find is that fasting is amazing when you think about its connection with the microbiome. We know that it can fasting can actually improve microbiome diversity. And if we understand diversity, which is the more diverse your microbiome is, the more richness there is, so the more you're moving towards optimal health. So that's one big piece. We don't know yet in science why. I mean, it doesn't necessarily make sense. I mean, vegetables and playing in the dirt makes sense, right? Because we're mixing with different soil microbes. We're getting plants that have their own microbe, biome themselves. And so that makes sense why we improve diversity, but why would a fast necessarily do that? But we show it does. So that's amazing. We can decrease inflammation with the fast, which helps with the body's ability to heal increased intestinal permeability, heal that mucosal layer that's on top of, or like that's along with the microbiome. We see, changes with different, like when we fast and we actually then add in more plant-based foods, we also create more shifts where we start to look at not only the abundance, but also the shift with the good guys, quote unquote, and something that, when you look at the microbiome research, they call it opportunistic bacterium. And why they say that is because most of the time they can be nice, but these bacteriums can actually then be a little bit more problematic and be much more inflammatory at times. And that could be due to high stress, high processed foods, high fats, high meat product. I mean, there's different components that you look at the microbiome research that cause that. So you see fasting actually do such a great job of shifting these back into a really balanced state. So what that means is you have less inflammation, you have, less bloating, let's say, you have less, and it's not just even GI symptoms. We see people have less, brain fog. Their hormones are better regulated. Their immune system is better regulated because now we understand the microbiome is not this just, like layer that's on the cover of everything that lines the outside world, but it's actually a major communicator with every cell in our body. So our brains, our hearts, our liver, our pancreas, our stomach, I mean, everything, is interconnected. So that's I think that's so powerful when we think about if we can affect change at the microbiome level, we affect change everywhere in the body. And then one of the greatest ways we can affect change is plant-based foods for sure as a central hub of what you're eating, but also, water fasting, which is great.
It's so interesting.
So fascinating.
It
And
is.
I am like if the knowledge you can acquire is like out here, I'm like still like every time I find something, I'm like, I had it like, oh my gosh, it's like it's amazing, right? Like there's so much to learn. So
Yeah, I think the more we look at anything, the more we're going to learn, especially with the microbiome, because it's so, I mean, trillions and trillions and trillions of little bugs, little guys and
fun.
gals.
Yeah. And I mean, we've yet to catalog all, I mean, obviously
Oh yeah.
trillions, like how can we catalog all, but I mean, the more we're finding out, the more we're realizing. So the newest research, which I think is really cool, is that they have 92% accuracy where you can take a stool sample from, let's say we took 100 patients and we took everybody's stool samples, 92% accuracy at this point, where scientists can look at the stool samples and doctors obviously too. And if they know what they're looking for, they can accurately predict who's lean and who's obese.
So fascinating.
Oh,
Yeah.
that 92%. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, so we're getting to a place where we can actually prevent or treat diseases based on that. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, no. But I think I get so excited about this too, because I feel like in my practice, what I've seen is that if we treat something else, especially what I've learned the hard way is that if we try and do like if I treat at a cellular level, like if we just go for the mitochondria, for example, before doing anything else, people can have a really bad reaction to that. But if we start with the gut, things have a way quite often of leveling themselves out. And so what does that save you down the road? That saves you potentially months or even years of chronic disease management. It saves you thousands of dollars in treatment, testing. I love functional lab testing. So, my dream scenario is to order a ton of lab testing for every patient. That's not always feasible, but like if we start at the person's center, the center of the person, which is our gut, we can so often like I always think of, when you're making your bed and you like open your sheet up and you kind of let it just like fall. When we treat the gut first and the microbiome first, it's like unraveling that sheet and just letting it fall. And now we can see what the actual landscape is, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
100%.
So
Agreed.
I love that. And I was wondering, so I have two questions. One, how can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you? And two, do you have anything like on your website or on social media around any of the information that you've shared today, especially with fasting and the microbiome?
Oh, you know what? So to answer your second question first, I am going to that's one project I'm working on right now. If you want to know more about the microbiome in its association with fasting, I have now spoken at the NHA conference, which is the National Health Association conference, which is usually in Ohio. I'm going to speak again next year, but this year I did speak about the microbiome. So if you want to get those recordings, I don't think Veg Fest, I spoke there and I don't think people can get that recording because I don't know if they recorded it. And I'm going to I do want to get all this information into a course so that people can utilize it and interact with it and get more information. So I will do that. So unfortunately right now, the only way you can see it is really like if you come to True North and watch me lecture about it. But that's how you can get in touch with me too. So I do work at True North Health Center. It's in Santa Rosa, California. So we do coaching there, and obviously you can come for a water fast. And then I do have my own personal website, which is www.drchillaveress.com. And so there is that. That's one of the best ways to get in touch with me. So.
Okay, perfect. So that'll be in the article right below this video for people too. Thank you so, so much for all of your time today and for sharing your expertise. Like I said, I think it's invaluable because there's so much misinformation out there. So again, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, Dr. Csilla Veress.
Thank you so much for having this magazine and sharing knowledge for the world. I love it. And I love being here with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's always so good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. That again was Dr. Csilla Veress. You can find her contact information just below this video. And I hope you have an amazing day.